welcome to the Route Consultant Weekly Webinar. For those of you who are here for the first time, haven't been here before, haven't met us before, my name is Josh Gregory. I am the Vice President of Education here at Route Consultant. Our team ran hundreds of routes across the country in both P&D and Linehaul, and today, really, we're here for two main reasons. One, for any buyer who's looking to get into the space for the first time, we want to make sure you really know what you're getting into and that you go in eyes wide open, understand what you're getting into, and can really help you make the right decision and find the right first step into the space. And then for those of you that are current contractors, we always want to make sure we're talking about all of the exciting things that are happening in the industry, both good and bad exciting, and making sure that this continues to be a forum and a place where we can talk about those things, ask questions, and always try to find the best path forward for all of that. So before I go too much farther, quick disclaimer that I have to read as I do every week. So Route Consultant is not endorsed by and is not recommended by Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. Route Consultant is not sponsored by, is not approved by, is not associated with, and has no connection whatsoever with Federal Express Corporation, FedEx Ground, or Amazon. For everyone who's here every week and all those who may be here for the first time or watching on YouTube, welcome back. We want this, like I said, to be, whether you're brand new or you've been coming to these for years, we want this to always be a place where that we can ask questions and learn together. And in light of that, we will have time for Q&A. It'll come at the end of the time today, but as I'm talking, if anything comes up that you have questions, you can go ahead and type those in. We'll get to those at the end. So whether it's questions that we're about what we're talking about today, or it's anything about the industry that you have questions on, that you want us to talk about and comment on, we're happy to help and address those at the end. So like I said, format-wise, Q&A at the end. We're going to go through some content and some updates at the beginning, and then we'll talk through just some upcoming events and listings, then we'll get to that Q&A. So to go ahead and start with it for all of you who are contractors, we're coming off the busiest week of the year. I mean, there's still some busyness coming up, but Black Friday was last week, which is typically some of the busiest days of peak season. And I know if you're on the P&D side in particular, there were some exciting days last week, both from a DRO perspective and from I was seeing a lot of bulk volume come through, which always makes things a little bit extra difficult when you're trying to handle, the inflated volume that comes. Now, there are still busy days to come. There's still things to be thinking about. And if you were here 2 weeks ago, we started a series on these Linehaul webinars where we're really focusing on the critical things that you need to have in place as you're bringing on employees now, or as you're bringing on employees at the beginning of the year, really to protect yourself and then set the right expectations for those employees. And for many of you, you might not have done these things ever. And so it's different things to be thinking about, and you may need to shore up your foundations. And last time we talked about the employee handbook and everything that's important to have in that, why it's important to have it at all. And today we're going to be focusing on another critical aspect of kind of these early employee onboarding and training aspects of your business, ELDP. And we've brought Alex Froome back on to talk through it and give all of his feedback on it. So Alex, why don't you go ahead and say hello and we'll get started.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, so I teed it up, but what is ELDP? What does that even mean?
So first of all, I want to say you almost had me with the all right. I thought you were going to give me a little Matthew McConaughey, a little, dazed and confused, give me a quote about, what I like about peak. The older I get, we get the same volumes something.
I think that
those lines.
I think my dazed and confused quotes would have to go through my marketing team before they let me start spouting those out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So entry-level driver program. Okay, ELDP. It used to have its own schedule within the contract, and you could go to Schedule E-1, and it was all laid out. Then it became a paragraph in Schedule E, and now it's like this little-known secret part of the TSPA that is kind of hinted at and winked at, and it's a very viable program. If you go to My Ground Biz and you look up entry-level driver program, it'll give you all the details there. And I actually printed out the old original ELDP program back from 2018, so we could all talk about it. But it's no longer out there anymore. So, but what does it mean? So there is a program. So when you hire drivers in FedEx, truck drivers specifically, Your driver has to have be part of one of three criteria. Either has to have 1 years of verifiable driving experience in the last 3 years, or he has to have 5 years worth of driving experience in the last 10 years, or have graduated from a qualified truck driving school within the past 18 months and have driven for 6 months consecutively for another contractor, or not another contractor, for another transportation provider. So like a Knight Swift or um, AAA Cooper, JB Hunt, one of those big entities. But there is a program where you can grab drivers straight out of truck driving school, and bring them on board and onboard them into you, and you can train them up. And that is called the entry-level driver training program. So we're going to talk about a little bit about what it is, but this is a way for you to mold and grab drivers and say, hey, I'm going to train you up and you are going to drive the Alpha Kilo. Well, my company's name is Alpha Kilo. You're going to drive the Alpha Kilo way. And this is how we do everything. You're going to train them up. And then, hopefully they're going to stick with you. And I actually have one, two, three, four, five drivers right now who've been with me for one of them's been with me for 4 years now, who I trained up as an entry-level driver, and it's stuck with me ever since. So it's a great way to, teach them, show them ropes. Actually, the one that's been with me for 4 years, he actually just he became a lead driver, which we'll go into details later, and actually trained up a driver as well on his own. So, um,
Perfect. Well, just a quick comment, Alex, for those of you that are line haul focused, all of this applies. There was a time where this was a program for P&D too, so you might have heard of it then. This has basically been replaced by the Qual Cert program and the way that FedEx is training on the P&D side, but this is still very valid. So for line haul in particular, so all of this, just if you're hearing it, you're like, I thought that's gone away. It has for P&D. But for line haul, this is still a really important part of bringing drivers on that a lot of people don't use. And so that's why I wanted to talk about it today.
So the first thing first, you have to have in your employee handbook. Remember this, guys? I showed you my Alpha Kilo employee handbook last week here, So in Schedule E or Section 3 of my employee handbook, where it talks about employee status and record keeping, I have a section which you cannot read that says entry-level driver program. Okay, so I list the details of how somebody qualifies to become an entry-level driver, what the program consists of, how they get disqualified from my program, and then what are the criteria to be a lead driver, and then how you graduate from my driver training program. Okay, that is something that is required by FedEx. So if you want to establish an entry-level driver program, you have to have one, you have to have an employee handbook, and two, you have to have in your employee handbook the details of your entry-level driver program, and you need to submit that to FedEx. Okay, so that's first thing first. Second, what is the entry-level driver program? The entry-level driver program is one, you have to identify drivers that qualify, that graduate from qualified truck driving schools. And if you go to My Ground Biz and you go into operations, you can find the qualified truck driving schools there. Okay, it's a PDF. They update it about every blue moon. And it lists all the schools by state. So you just have to search through it and say, and that will give you the information of what drivers are qualified. And then if you want, you can actually go recruit from those schools specifically. What I typically do is have my manager drop off business cards with the schools in our area, and so that these guys can either come look for us, come work for us right away, or they go out into the universe and go get a job with Schneider or something like that. And then after they've worked for Schneider for 6 months or Knight Swift for 6 months, they'll come to us. So I just had a driver who had contacted about 6 months ago, about 9 months ago. She went to go work for Schneider, and then from Schneider she came to us. So it's a very viable program.
Well, just a quick question there. What happens if you've got, let's say you find a driving school in your area that would be ideal, but it's not on that list? You know if there's any way to get it approved by FedEx?
There is a way. I have never successfully done it, but there is a way. You reach out to your safety and your hub, and you give them their information. They're going to reach out to the school's coordinator or lead instructor, and then they provide them a bunch of information. FedEx then goes out there and audits one of their courses, makes sure that they're doing what they need to do, and get certified. I was trying to get a community college that offered a truck driving program certified, um, and it never worked out. But I do know that other community colleges have been successful.
Okay,
So
cool.
you can do it. You just have to coordinate. You have to get, the school has to provide a tremendous amount of information to FedEx, and a lot of the schools don't always do that. So that's
Yeah.
really where the the choke point is. But so that's your entry level driver training program. Okay, so the qualified training, your entry level driver program consists of 450 hours worth of training, of which the first 150 hours is what is considered school time. So that's the 150 hours are the classroom and the in-class instruction and the on-the-road instruction that is provided by that driving school. So you don't have to worry about the first 150 hours. What you need to worry about is the next 300 hours. Of that 300 hours, it's broken down into two components. One is the observed training, and the other is the training while somebody is in there in the cab with you. Okay, so the first 96 hours of that 300 hours has to be observed. Okay, you have to have a lead driver sitting in the passenger seat. That lead driver has to be on duty and he has to be watching your driver as he's going down the road. And I'll talk about how do you get around that, but that's really important. So the first 96 hours of that 300 hours has to be observed with a driver sitting in the seat next to a lead driver sitting next to the seat next to that entry level driver. After that, then the next 100 and what is it, 300 hours. So next 194 hours can be conducted while the lead driver is only observing him for 1 to 3 hours each day, with the rest of the time counted as where the lead driver is sleeping in the back of his sleeper berth. Okay. Once he's completed that 300 hours, then he needs to take another road test. And you have to certify that he has passed the road test and he has completed all his training. And then you submit that information back to FedEx, and then FedEx will qualify that driver. Now, how does a FedEx observe this information? Well, you used to have to submit it through what they called an OPM 30, which was a record keeping log of the lead driver saying what hours was he observing the driver trainee. But now what they do is they use your ELD. And so your lead driver has to be in an on-duty position observing that driver trainee as he's driving. And so all those hours didn't get collected by FedEx. Your manager or your BC has to go in on a weekly basis and certify those hours, and say, hey, yes, these hours are correct. The manager, the lead driver was sitting in the passenger seat and the driver trainer was doing this. And then after 300 hours, you have to give them that road test and they get converted over. And the road test is important. If you do the 300 hours and that driver trainee quits and goes to work for another contractor, he actually hasn't completed his ELDP program. And so he's actually not qualified to drive for another contractor. Um, a lot of people do this program in different ways. What I typically do is I'll have my driver trainee actually drive with one of my solo drivers for about a week to 2 weeks to get those 96 hours of observed. And then I'll move him into a team truck and he'll do the rest of his 194 hours on teams. And the program generally takes about 90 days to complete.
Do you find, well, there's two parts to this. First, on the teams, when they've at least done the 96 hours, do you ever have, is that something where you still have it as a lead driver, or do you ever have any pushback from somebody not wanting to be a team with a guy who's a new driver?
Yeah, I mean, I have teams that are made up of lead drivers where they get paid a little bit more. Lead drivers are a higher standard, so I look at it as a training tool. So I have entry level drivers, then I have drivers, and then I have lead drivers, then I have assistant managers, and then I have managers. And so this is a promotion schedule for my drivers to eventually become, you know, I haven't promoted any lead driver or assistant manager. Actually, I take it back. Two of my assistant managers I referred to another contractor or to other contractors, and they became managers for those other contractors. I've matriculated guys all the way up through my program, and each of my managers has started off as at least as a lead driver for me.
So what do you look for when we've talked lead drivers a bunch. What is that like? What's your
So,
thought process
so
there?
a lead driver is somebody who has multiple years of experience within the FedEx universe, understands, okay, how do you talk to dispatch? What is the process to work on, like if you're running on URR schedule, how do you work the system? How do you get, how do you operate in that gray area? Like, do you just show up to a location and you just sit on the board and then you just sit there for 24 hours, or do you walk into dispatch and say, hey, you got any station work I can do while I'm sitting here waiting for a load to get back to the East Coast? Do you have any short runs I can do? Do you need me to do any pickups? I can run over to this spot if you need me to. Just let me know. I'm here willing to work. Is it somebody who's a go-getter who's going to take initiative, or somebody who's just going to sit there and not do anything? Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to grow these people into people who are going to become managers who I'm going to give a tremendous amount of responsibility to, and I'm expecting them to take my guidance and my instruction and then go put it to work on a daily basis in the company. Um, so that lead driver is a go-getter, has experience with FedEx, but then is an extremely safe driver. They can't have any log violations, one, and they can't have any moving violations. So no failed CSA inspections, no traffic incidences, no log violations. They have to constantly keep their logins in order. And so you have to have somebody who's a little bit experienced and actually takes pride in their work.
Got it. I think, whenever I think about this program, I I think it would just be helpful to explain to people kind of, do you find it's worth it? Because when you think about it, you're bringing in somebody who you have to have a second driver in there, and if it's a lead driver, they're already getting paid more anyway. So is it worth it to bring somebody from the ground up and do all of that training?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very worthwhile program. I mean, one, I've had, fathers and mothers want to bring their sons and daughters to work for me. I've had husbands say, "Hey, my wife's getting her CDL. Can I train her?" So I have families who work for me now. I have a multiple husband and wife teams. I have a father and his son, and he wants me next year. His son's turning 21, and he wants to bring his other son on board. So I mean, there's a lot of benefits to it. It brings additional amount of loyalty. The more family members I have working for me, the more loyalty there is. They're all pulling in the same direction. They're all conscientious. But also I get to instill my culture from the get-go. You're not breaking bad habits. You're not hiring somebody from another contractor who, you know, you're not even sure what kind of training he's gone through.
Yeah.
And then finally, when when the freight market is tight, when the spot market is high, and a lot of guys try to go out and become owner operators, this is a great resource to find and identify drivers that you can bring on board and train. Typically, and now this is something that you can do, but typically entry-level drivers, whether you're working for Schneider or FedEx, make a lot less than what your senior drivers or your lead drivers are making. Typically, what I do is I take my going rate. So say I'm paying my drivers 50 cents a mile. A good half of that money that you pay to that driver is going to go to that lead driver. Now, I meet the minimum wage requirements and all those kind of things, but I'm incentivizing this lead driver to do a really good job, and I'm also trying to incentivize this entry-level driver to take this job seriously and move up. And what I'll do is, like, I'll give them carrots along the way. Once you hit your 96, you get a boost in pay. Once you've hit 200 hours of driving, you'll get a boost in pay. Once you hit 300 hours, you get a boost in pay. And then once you do your road test and you pass your road test, you'll get another boost in pay until you're now a junior driver working for me.
So at that point, when they finish the program, is there an actual FedEx status that changes too?
Yeah, so they move from, so what happens is once you submit that record of a road test back into First Advantage, they stop being an entry level driver or an ELD within the FedEx universe and become a certified driver or a regular driver. So
Okay,
even if they only have less than 6 months of driving experience, they can actually leave your company and go work for another contractor.
got it.
Mhm.
What
So
do you put anything in your driver in your handbook to try to protect that? Or is there anything you can really do there?
no, no, I don't. I mean, I do give bonuses out to my drivers. Um, so I don't actually do any, I do recruiting and referral bonuses, but I don't actually do sign-on bonuses.
Yep.
I find sign-on bonuses to be counterproductive, actually. So what it does is it leads to you having an experience of where you have drivers jumping ship every 6 months to go find another sign-on bonus.
This one.
So I
Yeah.
don't do any sign-on bonuses, but I do referral bonuses. And I find that I have a lot of um, consistency in my, I mean, I don't have to hire, I don't have a lot of turnover. Now, don't get me wrong. Like I'm turning over the bottom 10% of my
Yeah.
workforce constantly. But like I said, I mean, I have drivers with me who've been with me for 6 years now.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
I'm trying to think about like what should I give them as a gift when they hit their 10-year mark? Do I
yeah.
like a watch,
It's a fun problem to have, right?
a big plaque, something like that?
Yeah. Yeah. So, eh, do you find that I know you kind of talked about how it's not, it's a little bit hidden in the contract. Do you find many people are actually still using this program?
The older contractors are,
Yeah.
guys who run a lot of teams, are doing it. The solo drivers, not much, because generally you get more seasoned, more senior drivers who are not looking to make the top pay. Like, I'll be honest, like some of my team drivers make over $120,000 a year. The guys who are on the road 6 days a week, you know, 52 weeks a year. I mean, they're crushing it.
Yeah.
Um, but my solo drivers, they have a family, they have a wife and kids. They want to be home on a regular nightly basis. They want to take their kids to baseball games and stuff like that, or coach soccer or whatever sport their kids are doing. They're coming home, so they're willing to take a pay cut and take less pay as a solo driver for more consistency in the hours. A lot of them are working in 8 to 10 hour driving days instead of being on the road for 6 days a week.
Got it. One
So
of
I
the
get a lot of
things,
younger. So a lot of my teams are younger drivers.
okay. Okay. That makes sense. They've still got more kind of the drive. They care less about the work-life balance in some ways. Yeah.
So that being said, I do have two older couples who drive for me on teams, and I think they just like seeing the world.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a way to get around and they're doing it together. Is one of the things you said is, after they finish the program, they can move on. But is there any way to validate that the observed driving or anything was done well? Or is it just kind of, you're just kind of trusting what that whoever did it the right way?
Yeah, I mean that is the one problem that you have. I mean, you have to trust like I don't hire entry level drive. I don't hire people with less than 6 months of driving experience unless I'm there, unless
Unless
they're
it's yours. Yeah.
unless they're mine and they're going through my training program. So yeah, I wouldn't hire somebody from Josh Gregory Trucking. I don't know
Yeah.
what kind of contractor you are, Josh.
Yeah.
You might be cutting corners left and right, teaching bad habits. Yeah, so I don't ever want to do that.
And
If
I think that that can help. If that is a common mindset, I think that can help alleviate the worries people might have of like, why would I want to bring this person up and then they could leave? I think they're not as attractive of a driver to a lot of people, and so you've built them the way you want to, and you know that you did a good job, but that's not necessarily the way everybody will view them.
Yeah, I mean the other thing is, I mean you can kind of hold that road test over their head. Like I don't ever, um, you have to coordinate that road test. It's usually done on a day off. It's not done while your guys are out on the road. So it usually takes a couple weeks to coordinate and schedule. Um, But yeah, the other thing is like we're trying to like we're giving him attaboy, we give him a certificate when he graduates. Um, we make it a big deal that he's completed, all this training,
Yep.
300 hours, you've done 450 total hours, and it's better than what it used to be. I think back in the day it was like 900 hours worth of training. It took
Yeah.
forever.
I've even seen contractors in the line haul space that they have their own CDL schools, and so they have completely like they own the complete vertical from getting people in for the first time, getting them all the way through, and they do ELDP immediately out of school. And that I've also seen people this sometimes I've seen ELDP used to promote their P&D drivers too.
Yeah.
It's kind of a way to do that.
Um, yeah, so there are guys who do that. They take their PND drivers and promote them into ELDP. I've seen that. Um, I think Spencer actually used to own his own driving school, didn't
We
he?
did, yeah, we owned one of those too, yeah.
There are a couple bigger contractors that have it. You have to run a lot of teams to make it worthwhile to do.
Yeah.
It is expensive to set up and create a CDL driving school, but it's well worth it. Um, it's not cheap. I mean, I mean, the other thing is, one thing I do is I'll set up a program with my entry level drivers, well, where they stay with me and I will actually make the payments. Now, it's not a supplement to their income. I'm just withholding their income and handing it off straight to the truck driving school. So kind of like doing it as a garnishment, but
Mm,
it's kind of peace of mind for a lot of my entry level drivers because, if they're getting that pay, a lot of times they're thinking, oh, I'm just going to spend it, and not realizing that they got to save $1,000 a month to pay back the truck driving school.
yeah.
So I will handle it as a garnishment and I'll take care of it and manage it all for them. Truck driving school can be anywhere from about $4,000 to about $12,000. So,
Okay.
um, something that I handle for my drivers, and a lot of them appreciate that, so it takes it off their mind.
Yeah.
Because you're looking at 21 to 23-year-old kids a lot of times who are graduating from these truck driving schools, and they're just not, they're not sophisticated enough to manage their money really effectively.
Yeah.
They get that first big paycheck, they're like, wow, I just got paid $1,000. I'm gonna go out and buy a Dodge, Dodge Viper. And you're like, no, no, buddy, don't do that.
Please don't. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That actually brings up a good question though. So you talked about the pay for ELDP. Do they get full benefits in the program, or is it not?
Yeah. So my benefits don't qualify until after you've hit 90 days.
Okay.
So you have to work for me for 90 days to qualify for my 401k. My healthcare is 60 days you have to qualify for. So it does take a little while to qualify for benefits, regardless whether you're a senior driver or an entry level driver for me. But yeah, once they come working for me, they start accruing time to get to that benefit program. And I find that, talking about just employee retention, once you get them hooked into your healthcare plan, you'll find that your drivers are really sticky. They don't want to leave. Once they understand how beneficial having a healthcare plan is, and the fact that you're not spending $3,000 to go to the emergency room, but you're only paying a $50 copay to go to see an urgent care facility, it makes a big difference.
Yeah. It is okay. So you talked the like 300 hours that you have to do of training. How long does that typically take them to complete?
It takes longer than the 90 days.
Okay.
I mean, if you think about it, um, so they're usually going to qualify for about 8 hours once they've done the 96. So the 96 takes the longest portion because if you do it on a true team, then the only time the 96 accrue is when you have that lead driver sitting in the passenger seat. And so if you think about it, for that lead driver to get a reset, he has to have 10 hours of sleeper berth time. So he only can be in the passenger seat for 1 to 3 hours each day. And then from there, he goes into the sleeper burst. So if you don't have him in a solo run, but have him in a team run, that 96 hours can take a very long time if he's only getting 15 hours a week, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe 18 hours at most. So you're looking at, somewhere around 6 to 7 weeks for him to blow through that 96. And then from there, he can start accruing 8 hours per day because the FedEx uses this 20% rule. So they say of that 10-hour drive time or 11 hours of driving that the entry level driver is doing, only 8 hours counts because the other 3 hours the driver's obviously sleeping. So it's just the way it works. So they cap you at about 40 hours per week. So then it takes an additional takes you additional 5 to 6 weeks to get through there. So you're looking at at a minimum of 12 weeks. So you're a little bit beyond that 90 days. Typically, in my experience, I'm usually getting the guys through within about 15 to 16 weeks.
Okay. Okay. I think that's a helpful kind of time frame and rubric there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, was there anything else you wanted to add on
No,
ELDP?
I mean, I think it's a very valuable tool to have in your toolbox.
Yeah.
When you first come in, you're gonna go, this is not something for for your brand new contractor
Yeah.
to do. You want to have the employee handbook, but I will say that I had my first entry level driver working for me about 9 months after I became a contractor.
Yeah.
Um, and luckily I asked around a bunch of other contractors in the terminal, and they walked me through how the program started. Now, back when I first started, it was 900 hours worth of training, and so
Yeah.
it took me about a full year to get this driver certified. But you
Yeah.
know, he's still with me, so it's all
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. I think exactly what you said is what's incredibly important is that this is a really useful tool to have in your tool belt. And in particular, times when it is really difficult to hire. It's not as bad right now, but I know, a few years ago when there's no one out there to hire, when when job prospects are bleak, this is a way to kind of go to the source and have a way to access a different pool of drivers, especially because not everybody uses this program or even knows it's there.
Yeah, I would say that maybe only a quarter of the workforce or the TSP contractor base knows about the program and uses it.
Yeah.
Um, and I will say when you use it most is when spot volumes are high and you have a lot of guys quitting to go become owner operators and try to strike it out on their own. A lot of those guys eventually come back to you,
Yeah.
but but it's also a great way to, if you have families, like if you have drivers like husband and wives or fathers and sons or father daughters, it's a great thing to do. Like I have a female driver right now who's talking about having her daughter get her CDL and can she train her? You know,
Of course. Yeah.
it's a great, so like I said, I mean, it's a great program. I actually have talking about that, I have another driver who wants to bring her sister on board. So these are things to do. It's a great way to build relationships and reward your drivers, your senior drivers, and give them more responsibility and give them a little bit of boost of pay and just continue to build out your culture.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Alex, on that. So we're gonna have a couple of announcements to go through, and then Q&A will come up. I already see a couple questions in there. So as I'm talking through this, feel free to type in any burning questions you have, and we will get to them in just a second. So first, this week we do have one new listing out of Kansas. It is 18 P&D routes at 1.5 million. This is 22 employees, 2 managers. It's a rural operation, so those 2 full-time managers are important, and the spare trucks are important as well. So if you're out in that Kansas area looking for a fairly large size operation, reach out. We can give you all the details on that P&D business. From an events perspective, the events calendar is out for next year. You can go look at it on our page. And very soon we'll be talking about a couple of our big events next year. We always do our expo, and it will always be our biggest event of the year, but we have a few kind of smaller mini expos that we're doing next year that we'll be talking about shortly. So you can go ahead and go and peruse those, and we'll be talking about those in more details in the near future. So let's get to the Q&A. So we've got the first one here from Eugene. So what you kind of talked about the lead drivers and how you think about them. But if you're thinking a true manager, what kind of sets someone apart? What do you look for, qualities or skills in that person to actually be a manager for one of your operations?
So first of all, I'm looking for somebody that has experience. I want them having a minimum of 5 years worth of driving experience. Actually, all my managers have over 10 years of driving experience and over 5 years of FedEx experience. But that's not a requirement. I want them at least have 5 years of truck driving experience. And preferably at least driving for a couple of years for me here in the FedEx universe, to be my manager. But then they have to be, a number of different things. They have to be, um, be cool, calm, and under pressure, be able to speak professionally to FedEx. Because they're going to be they're going to be your day-to-day contact with FedEx. They have to show initiative. They have to be a little bit of obsessive compulsive because I want them walking my line, looking at my trucks, making sure that they're taking care of the vehicles. They have to be a little bit of your dad and a little bit of your brother and a little bit of your best friend. So, they're going to be the first point of contact that your drivers have. And so, they're going to deal with your drivers' bad days, with their good days, with their successes. So you want somebody who can be a mentor, be a friend, and be a positive role model for these people. Do they necessarily have to have mechanical background? No. I mean, taking somebody who has initiative and is a good people person, I can train them into what I want them to be, but I cannot train them to have been driving, on I-80 in the winter. I need somebody that has that experience. You know, I actually have a driver who used to be one of my managers used to be an ice road trucker. Remember that TV show on Discovery?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that was him. He used to drive the Yukon. Um, so I want somebody that has experience in trucking, and then I can then train up to be, okay, this is how we coach. This is how we handle dispatching. But the biggest thing is I want somebody that I can put a lot of responsibility on and say, hey, I want you, given these conditions, this objective, I want you to come up with a plan. And I empower my managers a great deal because, we've talked about in the past, I want to work on my business. I don't want to work in my business. Like I didn't become a contractor to become a manager. I became a contractor to become an owner, and I'm constantly looking at ways to grow my business. Or if it's not this business, I'm growing something else. Like I'm becoming a route consultants podcaster.
Yeah, exactly. Did did you ever hire anybody outside of like your internal staff, or have all your managers been kind of promotions that grew into it?
Oh, my HR manager was an ex FedEx senior admin.
Well,
So
that's a fair
Uh,
one.
yeah, so she came from outside my organization. My payroll or I guess you call her my controller came from outside my organization. So my admin staff, my three managers who are my BCs, they were all drivers that I promoted
Got
over
it.
the years. I started off with uh, a crusty old BC. I think he's still a BC for some other contractor or not. He's maybe become an AO. Um, but I started off with him. He kind of taught me the ropes of the business for about 9 months, and then he went off to do something else. And I had to promote my manager. I had to promote managers, and as I've grown, I'm always looking for drivers, always looking for personnel that we can, say, hey, if we happen to grow into this direction or grow in that direction. And I fired managers. I promoted somebody that I thought was going to be a good manager, and learned that he was stealing money from me, and I fired him immediately.
Yeah.
So, you're not going to be perfect. I'm not
Yeah.
perfect. I make mistakes, but I try really hard to every single situation that we get into, like not to lose my cool with my manager and say, okay, hey, that's not how I would do it, or no, you kind of violated what I was looking to do. And let's use this as a teaching moment. Let's think through this problem. How do we solve it? And this is the direction you should be solving it in.
Got it. Yeah. So I think a couple of maybe pretty loaded, difficult questions here. First one, what are your, if you were picking a truck model, are there certain types of trucks you'd go for? And then is there any mileage threshold, or is there like a threshold you set where if it's at X mileage, I won't even look at it?
So brand new trucks, I'm only buying Freightliners. And that happens to be because one of the hubs that I operate in, the only dealer within probably like 15 or 20 miles of the hub is a Freightliner dealer. And so for me, having Freightliners in my entire universe means that I can move trucks between different organizations or different locations. And all my mechanics are the same. I know all my OEM and all my PMs are the same. It just gives me a lot more flexibility. But that being said, you don't have to be a Freightliner guy. I would say in general, there is not a great deal of difference between a Peterbilt, a Kenworth, a Volvo, a Freightliner, or a Mack, or a International. There's some nuances, but in general, they're all great trucks. It's more about your comfort with the mechanics who are going to be working on your vehicle and your comfort with the dealer that you're going to take your vehicle for warranty work. Um, then onto used vehicles. I don't buy used trucks with over 400,000 miles. Why? Because generally the trucks are still eligible for, they still might be under warranty. If not, they're usually eligible for an OEM. And this is really important. You want the OEM warranty extension and not like some third party premium 2000 or whatever. So I'll buy my trucks with 400,000 miles or less, and then I'll put on there a what they call an EW4 max warranty, which means that Freightliner or Detroit will cover any repairs on the vehicle for the frame, the engine, the after treatment system, and a lot of the electricals for 350,000 miles or for 3 years. So if I buy that truck, I know I have a money good truck for the next 3 years or 350,000 miles. And that's usually getting me to the point of where I'm looking to either trade that vehicle in, because I usually try to trade my day cabs in around 750 to 850,000 miles.
Got it. This one is related to that just came in. So how do you kind of choose one, do you have any mechanics on staff? And if not, how do you you just mentioned one of your most important things when you're thinking about which model is where will you go to get it repaired? Which dealer are you going to use? How do you decide who you're going to work with in an area?
So I mean, a lot of it's like I'll go in and I'll interview the different dealers and make and build relationships. The nice thing about Freightliner is that they have a program, and I'm sure Volvo and Kenworth have the same, but I just don't know about it. But Freightliner, like I have a national account with them, so they pull up any of my VINs, and all my VINs are registered with Freightliner. They know that I am a tier whatever customer, and I get a discount on service for any Freightliner dealership across the country. So I don't pay in like walking in off the street rates. I pay a preferred rate, and that also gets my trucks kind of moved up to the top of the process to get work done on them as well. So it's kind of nice. And the other thing is like for me, we've talked about this in the past for team trucks. All my team trucks are brand new trucks that are under warranty, and I rotate them out after 3 years. None of my team trucks have been on the road for longer than 3 years.
They're going so far and doing so much mileage, it just doesn't make sense to not. Yeah.
As to your question, do I have a mechanics on staff? I used to have mechanics on staff. I don't anymore. I'm looking to put mechanics back on staff. They're hard to keep on staff. Um, you have to have enough trucks in a location to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, you have to share trucks with share work with other contractors, and that gets complicated. But a good diesel mechanic, you're looking probably to pay someone between 30 to $60 per hour. So you have to have a lot of trucks in that location because realistically, what you're looking to do is put a mechanic on salary
Yeah.
to monetize the cost of that mechanic.
Gotcha. Now, do you ever have part-time drivers or anybody who can drive, but they're not a regular driver? Any basically like call lists you have of people?
So all my managers are backup drivers. So I have three backup drivers, and actually all three of my managers were driving today. And then I have or I have part-time drivers. I have some drivers who I guarantee a certain amount of work a week for being part-time, and then I have just other guys who are like, "Hey, just give me a call whenever you need somebody, and I'll let you know if I can work or not." So I have both. Um, and so I have a driver right now who's kind of an older gentleman, and he says he can work on Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's all
Yeah.
he works. He works on Tuesdays and Thursdays. He's willing to do anything under 400 miles. And, he's been a truck driver since he was like 18 and he's now 72. And, you know, he's like, I just got to get away from the missus. So,
At least twice a week. That's
um,
hilarious.
and he can't work on Wednesdays because Wednesday is bingo night. So that's what he's doing.
That is hilarious.
Yeah.
Okay.
I actually have I have a driver who is a part-time package handler or he's a full-time package handler for UPS and a part-time driver for me. So he works for UPS 5 days a week and gets paid an extraordinary amount of money as a package handler for UPS and
Wow.
then drives for me 2 days a week.
That's well, yeah, I hear they do well.
Yeah.
Um, okay, last question in here. And so if anybody else has any, this is your last chance to type them in. Again, a very loaded question. It's going to depend on the area. But when you're trying to think about a range, you kind of mentioned some of the top ends of your driver, but what is, when you're thinking skill, tenure, like what's the most you'd ever want to consider paying a driver?
So this is a really loaded question because
Yeah.
where you are in the United States is going to be a big driver of what driver pay is. I happen to operate in three of the lower paying areas. I operate in Mississippi, Tennessee, and Kentucky. I think Arkansas is really, really cheap to operate in. Louisiana is really, really cheap. When you get to like really expensive, I know of truck drivers, FedEx drivers, I think, who are making over 160, $180,000 a year working out of New Jersey, or Chicago, Denver, or LA. So you have really expensive drivers, and then you have all the different rules. So like I can pay my drivers cents by the mile, but if you operate in California or in, I think, Washington State, there's a lot. I mean, Washington State, I think you have to actually pay your drivers by the hour. California, you can pay them by the mile, but then you have to pay them sort of, some of their pay has to be paid by the hour. You have to pay for their lunch break. So there's a lot of different restrictions there. So it's really a state by state. What I will say is that typically drivers make anywhere from, I want to say, about $22 an hour to upwards of like 37 to $40 an hour, depending on what they're working, their seniority. The highest paying jobs out there right now, I think, are if you're not hazmat certified, um, and you're not big or you're not oversized load certified, it's probably working for Walmart. I think Walmart's paying like $1 a mile, or over $1 a mile. But to become a Walmart driver, I think you have to have 20 years of accident-free driving history. So it's kind of challenging. I know Department of Defense drivers and some really um, flammable hazmat drivers are making over $2 an hour or $2 a mile. But those are very sensitive jobs. Some oversized load guys probably make, upwards of $3 a mile. But in general, in our FedEx universe, you're looking at, depending on the location, somewhere probably between 50, maybe like low 50 cents a mile for solo drivers. And for teams, you might have some on the high range, you might have drivers making as high as 80 cents a mile. I don't know if anybody makes more than that. Like you guys would probably have a better sense of what like California or New York or Chicago drivers make on the team side.
People, there was a point, like you said, a couple of years ago where we had saw some crazy spikes, but I would say that's a similar range now across the country. Like you don't see many people making over 80 cents.
Yeah.
Um, Two questions came in quickly. So, one, you mentioned that the TSPA doesn't really mention ELDP. Aaron asked if it's in section 6 of the TSPA. Is that right, or is
I
it just
don't
not
know
written?
about section 6. I mean, it's mentioned briefly in section, it's kind of alluded to in Schedule E. I don't know about section 6. So no,
I don't
let me
know. Yeah.
let me look. Let's see.
And while you're looking, I'll load up the next question for you to think through.
No,
So,
because paragraph 6 of the actual base document
yeah.
is your company incorporation.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. And I don't know I don't know how explicit it is in the TSPA anywhere anymore.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, like I said, I mean, if you go to My Ground Biz, you can, if you search entry level driver training
yep,
program or ELDP, it gives you the criteria that you have to have, and then it actually refers to section 3.1 of Schedule E. But if you go to section 3.1 of Schedule E, it just gives you the criteria of what
driver training.
qualifies for a driver.
Yeah. So, Aaron, if you have any other clarification, we might be able to answer it. But other than that, we'll go to this last question. So, Daniel asks, how much do you try to hold for CapEx? And I think a quick note, different from CapEx working capital, a kind of a rule of thumb we would always give is $75,000 or 6 months of debt service, whichever is higher, is like a nice target for working capital. But I think this is a different question. So, if you're thinking about yeah, obviously, again, a loaded question because it depends on growth, your objectives, what your markets look like. But how do you try to think about what to hold back for future CapEx spend?
So I'm always looking at the ability. So for me, the size of the corporation I am now, which is a different story,
Yeah,
like I'm always ready to deploy $500,000 into my business if I see opportunities.
yeah.
I don't, but I'm also a different kind of structure. Like, so you should look at it as like, okay, how can I? So for me, $500,000 means that if I had a great opportunity, I could add 10 trucks, maybe even more. I could go out and buy, you know, a couple runs.
Hmm.
But realistically, like you want to be that, for me at my size of my business, I want to be that guy. So if FedEx came to me and said, "Hey, we need you to have 4 runs tomorrow," I can say, "Okay, you're done."
Yeah.
Now, when I was smaller, it was a different story, but I always tried to maintain at any one point in time 2 weeks worth of payroll in my business. Because that was like my amount of money that I could, if I had to, I could go out and put down 10% and buy another truck. So
Yep.
when I started off with 4 trucks or 5 trucks, I always had 2 weeks worth of payroll because 2 weeks worth of payroll is going to give you is probably, depending on how small you are, it's going to be about 30 to 60, $30,000. And that's enough to put a down payment on a truck or actually probably put down 75% of a used truck. Uh,
Hmm.
like I said, I mean, I just bought 2 day cabs because I had an opportunity to grow. Um, recently. I just bought 2 day cabs, under 400,000 miles. I put the 3 year, 350,000 mile warranty on them, and I bought them each for $48,000. And I thought that was a good deal.
Yeah, it's a great deal.
So I had $96,000 worth of cash, sitting around, and I just deployed that immediately. Like FedEx came to me and said, "Hey, we need you to add 2 trucks tomorrow," and I'm like, "I can get you to them in a week." And they're like,
Yeah.
"Why a week?" And I'm like, "Because it takes you a week to approve the trucks."
Yeah. Yeah. That you will actually won't let me drive them tomorrow. So
Like I'll have the trucks, but you won't approve them for a week. Okay,
yeah.
that's fine. We'll give you these 2 runs. So
Yeah. We'll cut you a break this time. Um, one more question came in. So somebody who's seeing different types of pay structures, a per leg, per mile, per day. What do you prefer from a pay rate structure?
okay, so per leg, or per day, that's usually somebody who's doing hub work or doing spots.
Yeah.
Per mile is you're doing mainline. I'm only a mainline guy, so I pay by the mile. I would love to get into spots because spots are really, really lucrative. You get better margins generally in spots than you do on mainline. But mainline is you get bigger volume and it's and they're on your A1 versus not on your A1. But so by the leg or by the day or by the hour, those are going to be your spots or your hub area work.
And if you see like I've seen contractors do mainline work by the hour, and that is just never gonna work.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in Washington State,
If you're required to, it's one thing, but I've seen lots of scary payroll situations where they just thought they came from P&D and they had to do it that way there, and they just thought that that was how they would continue it, and that is not
what
the
I,
idea.
what I find most effective with spots is guys will say, "Okay, I will pay you 30% of all the spots that you take in."
Yeah,
And that usually motivates the guys to do, 7, 8, 10 spots.
yeah,
Um, and it's usually really effective. Um, so
perfect. All right, Alex, that is the end of our questions for the day. So,
awesome.
thank you so much for being here, for answering all these questions, giving us all that insight, and we will actually 2 weeks from now.
No, we won't be here for 2 weeks, right? We'll be doing this in January.
That's what I was. Yeah, this might be the last one of the year. Well, 2 weeks from now is the 18th. We might still have that one.
We can do the 18th. I'll be
Yeah.
around.
We'll have one more Linehaul webinar this year, everyone.
We got orientation. Like, what do I do
Yes.
for driver orientation? And then, you know what? Hey guys, shoot some emails and text messages to Josh and talk about the topics you want for 2025.
Yeah, because that is in progress right now. But other than that, Alex, thank you so much for being here. And for everyone who's online now and on YouTube, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you all next time.
Sounds
Thanks.
good. See you guys.